right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well on this Friday. We've almost hit the weekend. I'm Lauren Cook. I'm your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising at JCHS, and I am Zooming from a new location. I've recently moved to Alameda, so I have no idea what strange noises might come up between 8 and 9 a.m. this morning, so we'll just find out together. But I'll mute if something unexpected occurs. And this is the first of our Coffee with Miss Cooks. I do these once a month throughout the spring for junior parents. Started doing this during the pandemic and found it was a useful exercise to keep on the schedule since folks didn't have to commute anywhere other than maybe their kitchen table. So you're welcome to have coffee or something else in your glass. I've already had my coffee, so I'm into water at this point. And a few housekeeping items up top. The default in my room is to stay on mute at the beginning. I've got a little content for all of you about what's happening with your kids at school right now. And then we'll just open it up for some conversations. So we can do that live. We can do that in the chat, whatever works best for you. But if you can stay on mute for now, that'd be great. We are recording, and I do send these out which really is around how soon Mr. McDonald can get it onto YouTube. But I do send these out afterwards. So if you're ever not able to make it, you can certainly watch them later. And I designed these to be an hour-long program. Oftentimes we don't have questions up until 9, but if we do, we will have a hard stop at 9, and we'll just pick it up next time, or you can always email me. So that's the plan here this morning. To give you kind of an update on what's happening with college advising at school. I have met with almost all of the juniors. I think I've got 5 or 6 more folks to go today and early next week. And in my individual first one-on-one meetings with them, we're talking about their questionnaires. Folks were very thorough and responsive in getting answers to me, and many of you submitted yours as well, which is great. So I'm just asking some follow-up questions with them, getting a little bit more detail and getting to know them better. We are talking about their college preferences at the moment, which of course, some don't have any. Some might think they know what they're aiming for, and that could very much change. It's not uncommon, for students now to be saying, I'm thinking about closer to home, give me suggestions on the West Coast. And then in 2 or 3 months are saying, I think I want to look at the whole country, give me more suggestions, and that's fine. So keep me in the loop with how you're feeling about what's actually on the list. And of course, at the end of the day, the list belongs to the student. They should add and subtract at will. I am generally throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, because sometimes folks need to be visiting campuses before they have a strong preference on size or on location, or how suburban or rural might be too suburban or rural or whatnot. So this is an iterative process over the next few months. And we're also checking in on things like testing. Good chunk of the class, I think, is going to kind of step off the testing train, which appears to be a very fine and rational choice at this point. And another good chunk will be continuing with taking an ACT or an SAT. And then we're also talking about faculty recommendations and doing some brainstorming on potential folks at school. And then, some folks will have a coach or a rabbi or NCSY, person or a boss that also submits a recommendation. So we're just starting to come up with a list of folks that might have potential for that. And some students have no trouble coming up with a list. Some, it's a little harder. And so that's one reason we start this conversation now. I do talk with them about keeping this in mind as they're going through their classes and how they're showing up at school for the next 5 or 6 months. Some folks are saying, I'm not sure if Miss Foth likes me. So well, let's lock that in and make sure she does. So we're checking in on those. And then at the end of the year, we will have another required meeting with me where we'll make some decisions on faculty writers. And I always want them to make those requests before the school year is done. I end the meetings by reminding them of what their kind of college advising homework is right now. If they're going to be pursuing testing, trying to make sure they've got at least one test sitting booked. And I've been hearing from lots of folks, we are continuing to have some of the test registration issues that we've had in past years where there might not be something available in the wider Bay Area, that you might be having to drive quite a ways. And I'm so sorry for that, and take it up with College Board and ACT. This is one of the many things that's super maddening about the standardized testing process. Is that they don't always have enough seats for demand. Know that seats sometimes will also open in the spring as they're seeing some of these issues. And I know ACT in particular had been sometimes doing like testing centers at some of the hotels near SFO, big ballrooms and all of that. So it doesn't hurt to keep checking some of the test registration sites to see if anything new has opened up. But hopefully you're able to get at least one thing locked in before we're fully into the summer. And then that gives some runway if they want to have a summer test date or something in the early fall to take another time or two. I also want to remind them that they have some homework in terms of research in colleges. There's no set deadline on this, over the next couple of months. It will be important to do some visits, whether that's online and doing some of the virtual things, or getting out in person during PASOC break, longer weekends, and certainly the summer. And the summer is a perfectly fine time to hit the East Coast. I know that some folks are nervous if classes aren't in session, but with travel distances and expenses and all of that, I think it can make a lot of sense to hit some of those campuses. I will say, though, I just saw a preview of next year's schedule, and we do have a lot of time off in October with the holidays. A lot of them are falling on weekdays next year. So depending on your level of observance and all of that, that could be a bit of wiggle room for you as well for visits. And I'm really just encouraging them that as they are excited about schools, to pull them over into their following column on SCORE. We use this sort of like social media speak on SCORE. They have editorial control over that column. And so ultimately, that's all I'm going to care about. My suggestions, great. Your suggestions you can put in SCORE, terrific. But I actually want to know what's getting traction with them and what they've pulled into their following column. So by the end of the academic year, I'm hoping that is populated in some way. And then over the summer, we can start thinking about narrowing in on where they might be applying and working on building that list. So as we move into February, know that I am happy to schedule meetings with you all, whether that's alone. Sometimes folks want to chat a little bit without the student in the room or with us together. We can do them on Zoom. We can do them in person. If you don't have any pressing questions, there's no need. We don't have to meet just yet, but know that I'm here to assist you as necessary. And just a heads up in terms of my schedule, towards the end of next week, I will be out for 2 days for some personal stuff. And then I'm flying to Syracuse with a group of college counselors to see their campus and to swing down to Cornell and check in on some of our students there. But starting the week of February 12th, well into March, I've got all kinds of open times on my schedule. And know that in like the reminder I sent you this morning, if you scroll all the way down to my signature, there's always a link there to my Google Calendar. So you can look and see what's open and book yourself an appointment. If you can't find something that works with your work schedule or whatnot, just drop me an email and we'll see what else we can do. And whether you want to come into school or whether you want to do it on Zoom, I have no preference either way. And in a moment, I will open this up for questions, but I do want to give you just 2 save the dates before I do that. Next week, January 31st, Wednesday, we will have another college money methods session from 6:30 to 8 p.m. with Paul Martin. This is on understanding your ability to pay for college, what your aid eligibility might look like. I think Paul I'm hearing great feedback from folks. Seems like he's doing good work. Even if you have an older child in college or have done this process before, I would say it would be really important to either go to this session or watch the recording afterwards because of the kind of sea change in the FAFSA, the Federal Student Aid Form, which the senior class is struggling through right now as there's a new FAFSA, but it's not always live and it's not always working. And we'll be through all of this by the time you all are applying. But the new FAFSA is radically shorter than something you might have filled out for an older child. I think it's 36 questions instead of 100 some, which sounds great. But there's also some other changes, like they're no longer taking into consideration if you've got 2 children in college in terms of any kind of tuition discounting or extra aid you would be eligible for. There's theories about why they're doing that, but I think it would be helpful to check out that session, especially if you've not done this process before. And Paul will give you some things to think about, as you're thinking about your taxes and everything else before you're actually applying later this year. And then so that's January 31st next week, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And then the other date to have penciled in on your calendar is April 14th, which is a Sunday. That is when we will be holding the case studies program. I say we, this is the San Francisco Bay Area Independent School Consortium. The 10 or so independent schools in San Francisco come together and hold a workshop for all of our juniors. There tend to be, I don't know, 1,200 some folks that attend this. It will be at USF this year. We're actually kind of running out of space at some of our individual high schools. So University of San Francisco, just a mile away from school, will be hosting. And about 100 different college admission reps come to this program. When I worked in college admission, it was always a must-do to come out because you're meeting sort of the cream of the crop in San Francisco. And the first half of the program, about an hour and a half, is a case study. It is a workshop on how college applications are viewed. And so there are fake college applications. There's like 3 draft Common Apps. You work for a fake college. You're put in classrooms led by admission reps, but there's parents in some room and students in another. And you literally go through kind of a fake college admission committee. And you talk about what's important in applications and how applications are read. And then you vote as a committee on admitting a student, waitlisting student, denying a student. And I hear over and over that this is one of the most effective and impactful exercises that families can do to really start to understand the ins and outs of the process and things that feel a little like behind the curtain. So that's the first half of the program. The second half is a big college fair. And then you've got these 100 some colleges that you can go try and chat with, elbowing through the other 1,000 people that are there. So April 14th, it typically starts at 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. We'll go till around 5 at USF in the city. So have that on your calendar. And unfortunately, there is no virtual component for this because it's very interactive. So if you aren't able to make it, it is what it is. But that's why I want to make sure folks have the date early. Okay, so look at that, 8:15. I did exactly 15 minutes of content. All right, so now we'll just open it up for some questions. So you are welcome to unmute yourself. You're welcome to put stuff in chat, whatever feels comfortable. But what is on your mind that we can chat about together? Yes, Robert.
Well, I'm curious, especially since COVID, are there any schools that have kind of more recently emerged in your, vision, whether West Coast or elsewhere, that just kind of have come out from under the radar that are intriguing schools that, might be good for JCHS kids to look into?
Interesting question. And I will say there's sort of there's a pro and a con to places that have emerged. And so
Yeah.
I will say, you just got this news this week. So we often have students look at a place like Rutgers, which on the face of it, it's in New Jersey, it's a public institution. Like, why wouldn't you stay closer to home? But there's a really solid and thriving Jewish community there. You've got access to New York City. They've generally been kind of broad access, so you don't have to be kind of perfect on paper to get in and access maybe even their honors program, et cetera. Well, the secret's out about Rutgers now. And we had a couple of kids this week get waitlisted that, in past years would have been admitted. And in their decision letters, it said they had, I forget what the exact percentage was, but it was something like a 65% increase in applications this year. So yeah, sometimes when the secret's out, it's not such a great thing. But I will say we've had a lot of really happy kids headed off to University of Oregon. And they have really emerged as a nice counterpoint to the UCs, which are not always accepting all of our kids as they've gotten so selective. They've been very happily test optional, strong sense of Jewish community there. And I think folks like the balance of nature and, the small college town of Eugene and the big athletics and all of that. But it really also depends on the student. One thing I love about JCHS is that all of our kids are terrific and so different and interested in so many different things. So there's no, one universal recommendation I'm making to everybody, because, everyone has different needs and wants. But
No, I'm not suggesting it's a universal, but just if there's any school that you might not have been so taken with some
Mm,
years ago that now seems like, this may be
yeah.
uh
I will say one that's coming up more for me, I'm putting on lists, and we've got some happy kids there, is University of Portland, which if you walk around their campus, this is a Jesuit place. There's a lot of crosses. There's a lot of stained glass. But it's not, super dogmatic, or I don't think there's big requirements curricularly around religion classes. And for better or for worse, things have been, and COVID was one thing, but the war in October 7th has been a different thing. I have heard from the parents of our students there how delightful their kids' experience has been there, partially because, and you can take this how you want, they don't allow any protests on the campus. And so it has been quite placid for our Jewish students. And it's a lovely manicured campus just off of downtown Portland. So you've got big city access with a small community feeling. So Portland, is emerging here and there as something that I don't know I would have recommended as much in the past, but right now feels like a very solid choice, especially for folks interested in nursing. They've got a really strong nursing program. So yeah. Other questions from anyone? Again, feel free to put in the chat or unmute yourself and just launch it out to the group. I know you've got more things on your
I have
mind.
one more.
Yeah, go for it.
What is the reputation of this school, the University of Denver, in terms of, academic reputation? Is it a liberal arts school or more like a pre-business type school? I've been hearing about it on occasion.
Yeah, and I wish Patty Giselowitz were here. She actually emailed me to say, I can't make it this morning, but Eliza, her daughter, is on a gap year currently in Israel, but enrolling there next fall. And Patty keeps sending me emails from Denver because she's so impressed, just in advance of Eliza enrolling, with the communication and the nature of things. So University of Denver is a medium-sized institution. It is private. And so medium-sized meaning, I don't know if it's 6,000, 7,000 undergrads, and then they've got some graduate students as well. They do have kind of a liberal arts framework in terms of, they offer the humanities, art, social sciences, science, and math. But they do have a number of really strong pre-professional programs as well. Their business school in particular is something that gets a lot of traction and notice from our kids. And they have a really strong reputation for strong learning support. So any of our students that have, any diagnoses or even a more complex learning profile, I think Denver is giving really 360-degree sort of scaffolding support resources for that. And so it's been a great magnet for our students in that way as well. Large number of Jewish students, strong, active Hillel there, Chabad. So I think it just checks a lot of boxes and not super far from home. You got direct flights on United, access to downtown Denver there, but, a sense of campus and space. And athletically, they've also got some really strong programs. I think gymnastics in particular, that like comes up in my feeds and listservs a lot for Denver. But I think of it as a nice kind of, it's not quite a hidden gem because a lot of people know about it. But I do think it's a really strong option for more of our students than might be aware of it. So, yeah. Other questions for those of you just joining us? We're into just sort of open question time. Yeah, Noah. Or Susan. Oh, did I? Oh, I
Can-
just, yeah, hi. Go ahead,
Hey,
Heather.
so weird to operate from the car. I just joined, so sorry if you've already talked about it. How is the mental state of our kids these days with all this? I just wonder if, like, you've noticed, are they excited about it? Are they nervous about it? Is it still kind of like the beginning? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a lot of excitement, a little bit of nerves, but most of my meetings have been really quite joyful and a lot of good questions with folks. And for those of you who have students who don't feel fully locked in or engaged or excited about this process yet, know that this is the moment as everyone cycles through meeting with me and starts getting lists and has to remember how to log into SCORE. Like, I think there is a rising tide around college conversation that lifts all the boats. So I'm getting a lot of enthusiasm. And I think our senior class this year is very also, they've had their stress, they've had their anxiety, but I think also joyful and enthusiastic and positive around the process in a way that really helps and, can trickle down a bit. And I will later in the spring have a junior class meeting where I invite some, intentional selected seniors to come talk with them about what they've just been through and answer questions and give them some encouragement and support. But I think generally it's good. I am, hearing a bit around wanting to understand Jewish communities and what life on campus will feel like. But in terms of concerns, the thing that's actually coming up most consistently, and it is from almost every single one of our young women, is, states where they have bodily autonomy. So I am hearing some more very direct and absolute, don't put any schools on my suggested list where there are not women's rights. So that's been interesting. I thought I'd get more of that last year as the Roe decision was overturned. Didn't hear as much about it, but it has been wildly consistent in my
Well,
meetings.
that's wonderful. And our next step as a community is to have the boys ask that question too. But thank you so much. Is it you? I hope it's okay to ask, or maybe personally to ask, if you have noticed anything, or in the future,
Mhm,
please let us know so we can support our teens because they are teens. So by
mhm.
definition, we might not know what's going on in their heads. So just, you know,
Yep, absolutely. Yes, it is an
thank
absolutely fair question. And as I do, more of these coffees, I generally have Miss Beck come in for one of them and just talk a little bit about understanding how your kids are doing at this point and ways to approach this process so that we can just keep the anxiety down as much as we possibly can. So, yeah. Other questions. So we got something in the chat. Can you please recommend some resources that can help students with various interests determine potential majors? Yes, absolutely. So I will say within SCORE, there are some career assessments, and SCORE has been changing these. There was something called U Science that had more in-depth games and whatnot. The upside to U Science was that it was very intentional, specific, and thorough. The downside was it took a really long time to go through their games. And so some kids would just kind of give up and not finish it. So what we have now, I'm actually forgetting what the new branded name is, but it's shorter. And if you go into SCORE and they're in the My Colleges section, scroll down on the left-hand navigation, underneath that My Colleges section, there's something that says career assessments. And so if they click on that, it can take them through a relatively short questionnaire. It's not that different from the stuff we might have done in middle school or high school around, like, do you like working with people? Do you like working with kids? Do you prefer to, work alone and those kind of things? You'd think there would have been more advancements in these kind of questionnaires since then, but not so much. They also can do a free, Myers-Briggs assessment online. you know, and if people have various opinions about these kind of assessments and whether they're, you know, actually scientific or not. If you ask Miss Hunt about this, she'll give you an earful about how she feels like it's all sort of garbage. but I do think if you do enough of these kind of things, you can get some trend lines about yourself. And I do a lot of them. Most of them say that, you know, I have inclinations towards helper professions, towards education, social work, that also, you know, I seem to have a proclivity for making some order out of chaos, which I think the college admission process can be very much chaotic. So it can direct you in some general fields that might work for you. If you do them within SCORE, you know, so then it's talking about different kind of career fields. You can then filter on colleges that might offer the majors that lead to some of those career fields. I will say, though, when you're talking about something pre-professional, yeah, taking an engineering major, a business major, a marketing major, that's got kind of an obvious through line to a profession. But let's say what they think they want to do at 18 is different from what they decide on at 23 or 27. I will put a pitch in for the kind of liberal arts framework where you are learning how to read and write and think critically and formulate arguments and have some breadth to your curriculum. And maybe you go in depth in math or sociology or biology or whatnot. But you are widely educated and broadly trainable, right? Because they will have a lot of different careers and interests. And not to sound like one of those, you know, TikTok things, but, you know, we don't know some of the careers that they might be pursuing 15 years from now. Because certainly, you know, majoring in something that would be around social media wasn't an option for me in college. And now all of my friends seem to be engaged in some kind of field related to that. So I would just say don't get too hung up on major choice, because that doesn't have to or need to or necessarily even always point to a specific career field. If the college is strong and has a good career office and internship options and all of that, they can figure some of the actual career stuff out while they're doing their undergraduate degree. We've got another question in the chat. Are there any college fairs coming up in the area? Such a great question. I don't know that I've gotten specific dates yet, but typically in April and early May, there are a series of fairs that go around the Bay Area at Dominican and at maybe Menlo College down south that tend to be more West Coast schools. So it's more sort of local things. I will push out those dates as I see them. And then the National Organization for College Admission Counseling, NACAC, often has one big fair in the spring at like a convention center. They have been winnowing down the number of cities they do those in and offering more virtual options, for better or for worse. So if I get some dates for those, I will push those out as well. But for anyone who missed at the very beginning, I gave a save the date, April 14th at USF. University of San Francisco will be the case study program for this spring, which is 100 some colleges. They tend to be not highly selective, but more selective, highly sought after, I will say, schools, where half of that program is a workshop where you do a mock admission committee and see how admission decisions are made. And the other half of the program is a college fair. And it's just open to Bay Area independent schools. So it's not just the general public. So have April 14th that afternoon, 2 to 5-ish roughly on your calendar. Robert, yes.
So a quick question about about schools that do allow or require interviews. I'm curious, is there a process where the kids learn a little bit of technique, how to handle a college interview? And I was also struck because we're setting up in April a couple of visits to places where they even offer juniors an interview experience, which I thought might be too soon for relatively naive 11th graders, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, what a great question. Very timely. So I would say pretty much uniformly, don't do interviews as a junior. And I think they don't have enough knowledge about the process and where they are. They will definitely not have enough knowledge about that school to really sort of demonstrate why they're a good fit. And they're just younger, and so I think let's give another couple of months for that maturity and that frontal lobe to develop and all the rest. So doing interviews during senior year is really best. You might feel compelled if you're going to visit. You're like, I'm on campus, take advantage of it. Know that so many places are doing virtual interviews, of course, with the boom of Zoom after COVID. And reps, when they visit, say, JCHS in the fall and do those school visits, they're also in the area conducting interviews. They might, sit down at Starbucks for an afternoon and have folks sign up for interviews, sit in the lobby of their hotels. So there will be more opportunities, and they might even be local in the fall and winter. And more places are moving to not interviewing until you apply. So I've actually, in the last 2 weeks, had a spate of seniors coming in to practice interviewing with me before they go in to meet with the WashU rep or the Penn rep or whatnot. So, so timing on this is very fluid. But yes, a number of resources. In the College Advising Handbook, there is a page of advice on interviewing. Again, that's linked on the College Advising website. You can download it at any time. And so there's some sample questions to think about that you might want to practice some answers to, some advice on if it's in person, how to dress and all of that. If it's on Zoom, it's kind of easier sometimes to have questions laid out in front of you because they can only see what's in your frame. So you can have some prompts and things for yourself. And then thinking about follow-up questions you might ask, because of course, for most places, this is a conversation. So it's not just about you being assessed. They're also going to ask, what do you want to know? And it's good if you have some things to ask. And if you're nervous, sometimes you freeze up, you blank out. So having some pre-prepared questions in your back pocket can be useful. We will do a little bit of a college advising boot camp in August. I always have a senior college workshop. The first day, it's a Monday. I think this year it's like the 14th, 13th, something like that. It's the day that play rehearsals start. Athletic practices have already been in session. So it's a time where hopefully most folks have been returning from summer camps, but it's at school, and I will bring in 6 or 7 college reps to work with the students. We're just spread out in the commons, and students can have writing reviewed by an admission rep and get feedback on that as they work on polishing it up. They can practice an interview with someone and kind of get the nerves out. I'm also happy to practice with students. Like I said, I've been doing it twice in the past week with seniors. I did thousands of interviews when I was at Mount Holyoke. So just kind of have them go through the process of talking extemporaneously. Yeah, there's, I would say once we get into the fall, then it's really kind of open season on interviewing. So, and I will just say interviewing, it tends to be most of the smaller schools that will offer it as an option. Some mid-sized schools, like I, was happy to hear places like WashU are still interviewing. Any real large institutions, they don't have the time, the bandwidth, the staffing for that. So the UCs, big public universities, interviewing is usually not an option on the table. So, Susan, you've had your hand up patiently.
Hi, Lauren. I've got 2 questions. I don't know what you have time for. First one, how important do you think it is for our kids to have social media accounts at this moment in time? I know a lot of the colleges use that as an avenue to give you a glimpse into what they're doing. And number 2, I'd like to know a little bit more about the tag program between community colleges and the UCs and exactly what the connection is and how that works.
Yep,
Thanks.
perfect. Yeah, so great question about social media, very timely, because we are currently working, we at the school, we're going to have a meeting with the sophomores and juniors in a couple of weeks during a community block around social media usage. This is more from the student angle and thinking about how you are showing up as a digital citizen and what kind of footprint you might be leaving, and just, some more subtle or overt reminders that the internet is forever. So the things that you put there, even if you're on private lockdown accounts and all of that, screenshots happen, things happen. So trying to have them be thinking proactively about being responsible social media users. But if there are some kids that aren't on social media at all, I think it can be useful, even if you have an account that you're not posting on, to be following some of these campuses and looking at the videos and things that they're posting. You can get a sense of if it's official accounts from the school, what they think is important, the kinds of videos and things that they're showing from a day in the life on campus. If you follow individual clubs, you could follow the Hillel accounts, you can follow teams to get a sense of things. And sometimes it can get a student more excited about a school, and sometimes it might make them think, I don't know if this is the place for me. And that's great, actually. That's the point, right? So I do think it can be useful either way to be following some of these schools online. You're also going to get a very managed, PR focused bit of marketing from admission offices with these things. So if you can actually follow or look at YouTube videos or things from students or faculty members or whatnot, that's going to be more day in a life, not so filtered, for better or for worse. And that's really useful to have heads up on things, before you're actually enrolled in a student. To the second question about TAG, make sure everybody knows what TAG is. So we have like 123 some really fabulous community colleges in California, and there is something called the Transfer Admission Guarantee, TAG, with the University of California system, where you can spend 2 years at a community college, get your general education requirements. There's typically a TAG office with an advisor there, and they've got a lot of information on the web to let you know what kind of those courses might be for what you're thinking about your area of study is. If there's a certain GPA requirement, maybe you need to maintain a 3.0 or a 3.4 or whatnot as you're doing those TAG classes. But if you are, in the TAG program and you meet those requirements, you then have a guarantee for admission to 5 of the UCs. So the remaining UC campuses, and it's some of the most selective, UCLA, Berkeley, I think San Diego, maybe Irvine, you receive preference in their admission process. There's definitely a thumb on the scale for you having done TAG, but it's not a guarantee. With the guarantee, you do have to say, if Davis is your goal, you need to explicitly say, like, Davis is where I want the guarantee. So you pick one where you want the guarantee. You can still apply to other ones, but if you get into Davis, you're guaranteed you're going to go there. So it's a terrific way if the UC is the goal, whether that's being closer to home, whether it's specific programs, whether it's financially. It is such a challenge at this point to be admitted to a UC as a first-year student, especially some of those most selective ones straight out of high school. TAG is a great way to still be able to reach that goal. And it can be more affordable because you're paying community college tuition for those first 2 years, getting your associate's degree. Some of the downsides to it, everybody goes to a community college. Community colleges are open to everyone. So peer culture can vary wildly in the classroom, right? Because you've got adult students, you've got folks who have bombed out of high school and need to kind of do a redo. It's a very, day student culture. So it is good for students who are able to really sort of mind an independent goal and stick with it. And not, necessarily need the influence of peer culture either to help them kind of stay competitive, motivated, all of that. And, it is a day student culture for the most part. There are some community colleges where there can be some more residential components to it, but they, will not have necessarily the same kind of clubs, activities, social, life in their first 2 years of college that they might have at a more traditional 4-year college. But I think it's a great choice for a lot of students, and understand that there is a state mandate for the UCs to take transfer students, a certain percentage of transfer students each year, and a certain percentage of transfer students need to come from California community colleges. In fact, it's often like the vast majority. So I have a friend that worked in transfer admission at Cal for the last, 10, 12 years. And it was often like 95% of their transfer admits were coming from community colleges. So this is a very real, great pathway to consider as you look at all your different choices over the next year. So, and there's nothing you have to do to like apply to a community college. You're basically signing up for classes. So can be on the score list as an option. And we just kind of see how things go over the next year and a half before you decide if you're going to pull the trigger on that. Other questions? What else? I'm trying to think what else at this time of year might be pertinent. I will say that if you go do some campus visits, and I think PASOC is so late this year, sort of end of April, most college campuses should be open. Sometimes when it's earlier, it can dovetail with a more traditional spring break timing on a college campus, but you should be able to see some schools if you feel willing and able to tour then. I love to hear about what happened after college campuses, for better, for worse. If you had students that were like, let's leave, I'm done with this tour in the middle of it, or if they're sort of very enthusiastic about something, please encourage them to come in and give me a download, or if you want to hop on Zoom with me and tell me what happened, it just helps me as we're refining choices along the way. I'll also note course scheduling will pick up next month, and we will have lots of stages before you might get to the needing to ask me some questions about senior year classes. But there will be that initial meeting with your advisor. They will usually confer with me if there's some basic questions around stuff. But know that if you're wondering how many APs is too many APs, do we need an AP? How to fit in those last JS requirements while also doing all the other things they want to do. Let me know if I can be helpful in trying to strategize things. And we have some real high-flying juniors that don't have any study halls right now, which some of them are managing it. Some of them are, just treading water, trying to keep their head above water. I am not a fan of not having a study hall in senior year. So as you go into some conversations with your kids, just know that regardless of how they feel about managing their workload, they are going to have what essentially becomes a part-time job, at least in the fall, with the college applications and the college process. And so allowing some time both to meet with me, to go to college visits, and to actually be working on applications and writing, having that wiggle room in their schedule can be really important. And yes, their Keystone is sometimes empty space, it's sometimes meetings, but sometimes it's their own independent time. Shouldn't technically really be a study hall because Keystone has very specific markers this year-long project they're working on. So having a study hall in addition to that can be important. If they don't have one, we'll make it work. We can sometimes meet during Keystone and whatnot, but I do think it adds a layer of intensity that for mental health purposes, it can be great to just avoid the extra stress of not having that extra time. Susan.
Yeah, Lauren, quick question. In terms of putting together resumes for the kids, looking at summer internships, that kind of thing, that's asking for that. Is that something they will do at school that you'll help with, or is that something we need to take care of?
I think, oh, look, it's my dishwasher. That's a random noise. So sorry about that. I will say so much can be done, and there are going to be very few times I'll encourage you to look at AI, but there's so much that can be done now on AI in terms of producing a resume, or that there are websites in which you can just sort of put in some basic stats about yourself and it spits out the formatting, that we don't generally take time at school to work on that explicitly, but I am happy to help them with that, send them some resume examples. I think they are going to want to look up what's a student resume versus a professional resume, right? They probably don't have a lot of job experience, if any, at this point. So looking at examples that have themes around clubs, around athletics, around service, so it is able to sort of be comprehensive around the activities they're involved in without being expected to be formatted like an adult resume. And yeah, if they're applying for work, they probably do need to have something like that. So happy to look it over for them. But many students don't end up having a resume by the time they're applying to college. And that, just know that if your student doesn't have a resume, this isn't something you need to sort of panic and just do, because right now the activities section on the Common App on the UC application serves that function, right? And prompts them about putting in how many hours per week are you doing this? Do you have a leadership role or title? Give us a little, description description of what it is that you do. And some applications say if you have a resume, you can feel free to upload it here. But that's not meant to be a stressor, like they need to have yet another thing they're creating. So I would say if they're applying for an internship or something that asks for it, great. But they don't necessarily have to create one at this point yet. And so much stuff, is online at this point. People are just really kind of filling out like a LinkedIn profile, and that's serving, as a resume in the 2024 digital age of it all. So, yeah. All right. Any other questions? Dassy, yes. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, that's Dossie.
All right, great.
Hi. Sorry for joining late. You may have shared this already, but I'm feeling very much in need of having some kind of calendar right now with kind of some guidance around what to be thinking about at what particular point in time. Do you have a resource like that you could reshare?
Yeah, if you look at the College Advising Handbook online, so go to the JCHS website, go to College Advising, scroll down, there's a link right there. The first couple of pages give some timelines, some rough timelines for senior year, for junior year, about what might be happening in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, in the summer. For you to be thinking about over the next few months. The biggest categories of items would be if the student is going to test, to be trying to get a test date on the calendar. Usually late spring is best for most people as their first time. By the end of the school year, they should aim to have some colleges in their following list on score, be thinking about what, the shape of that looks like. As we get into the summer, I will go into score when we've got grades from this year and start tagging schools as whether I think it's a reach for them, a possible, a likely. So that's the time when we kind of start shaping the list or looking to see, yeah, we might be way overreaching, or maybe we're way undermatching, so we will keep fine tuning the list during the summer, but we should have something to work with by the time we get into the summer. What else? Having April 14th, the case studies program on your calendar, which is a Sunday, somewhere between 2 and 5, exact dates to come. Big college admission workshop and college fair that is really useful for juniors. Those are some of the 3 big things to be thinking about now. Other stuff will be embedded in your schedule. So as students get towards the end of the year in their English class, we will work on their draft college essay. It's for a grade as part of their English curriculum at the end of the year. And then I will continue nudging them about working on that writing during the summer. They will all be required to meet with me again towards the end of the year to work on teacher recommendation requests. So there's things that'll just be in the schedule that you don't have to hold. I will hold it. I will nag them. I will make sure it's done. But the handbook gives you, the into the summer, what are things that might be happening, and into the fall. And know that in August, Ms. Hunt puts together a big schedule for senior year of all sorts of dates to be keeping in mind. And some of those are my particular deadlines, because I, again, don't want anyone submitting things on actual college admission deadlines. Servers meltdown, websites crash. So I have some mechanisms through which I am forcing students to get things done earlier, sending them to me earlier to review. And so they will see clearly those deadlines for Ms. Cook at the beginning of the fall. So I hope that's a helpful sketch. Question
Thank you.
in the chat about, is it too early to talk about summer? Yeah. Oh, and then we've got another one, was just going to talk about good summer options as well, especially for kids that might be interested in a good academic experience, but who don't have the grades for something like Cosmos. Also, what non-academic things do colleges look at favorably? So timely. I just was on a webinar yesterday for an hour with other college counselors talking about summer programs, and there were some college deans in the rooms to talk about, how different things are viewed. Do they even matter? So a few things to think about with summer. Yes, it's important that your student is doing something, but something can be broadly defined. So something would be more than binging Netflix all day on the couch. And I want to be clear that a week or 2 of binging Netflix on the couch can be great and important. And there should be scheduled room in summer for nothing, right? And just decompressing from the school year or preparing for, the load of senior year. But after they've had a moment to reset, Summer camp, terrific. Lots of kids have been doing camp forever. They want to go be counselors and do things. Love it. And that counts as something. On the whole other end of the scale, if they have an internship that they're paid for and they're doing something fancy going into, you know, a tech company every day, terrific. Not expected, not something that it feels like everybody has to be doing. Colleges understand that some folks just need to work, you know, bagging groceries at Safeway or, you know, Starbucks barista. Terrific. You are doing something. Most of our kids will try and do some kind of exploration that might nod towards what they might want to do in college. So if you're looking for some vehicles for that, some easy ones, JFCS, the Jewish Family and Children's Services, has an internship program. You can, you know, talk with them, apply to be an intern, and they help place you somewhere. So you don't have to be contacting businesses and companies on your own as just a random high school student. There are academic opportunities that might happen on college campuses or through other programs. I know a lot of our students that are thinking about engineering will spend some time with Blue Stamp Engineering. They have historically, I think some of this might have changed since COVID, but they've typically had a camp in San Francisco and they've had something down near Palo Alto, more Silicon Valley. Blue Stamp is great. You like make your own robot or pursue your own kind of like activity over the summer, an app or whatnot. But you can do all of those with the college campus academic programs as well. I will say a couple of things about programs offered on college campuses. They are not going to help you get into that school later on. So jumping through the hoops to try and go to a camp at Stanford doesn't now mean you are more likely to be a strong applicant for Stanford. So just keep in mind that these summer programs are primarily moneymakers for colleges. They have to keep the lights on in different ways. And so they will gladly take your like $2,000 for a week on their campus. Some of them can be expensive. And it is not now giving you an edge with that particular campus. What it is doing, and I would say if you find some that feel more affordable, that will give you a grade that you actually are accessing a college course for 4 or 5 weeks over the summer, that can be very useful as it works kind of like an AP class in terms of giving you some extra credit and some extra shine academically. They can be a great opportunity for a student to have an experience living on a college campus. You're usually in a dorm, getting a preview of what that looks like, maybe a different part of the country or whatnot. Terrifically useful as they're thinking about their preferences and what it's going to be like to navigate life away from home. You know, it is something, right? That is then, you know, sort of on their resume for the summer. So most college campuses offer some kind of experience, but key differences may be if it's working like a camp and it's a week or two and you just have attended something where you're learning a little bit, it might be hands-on, you get a certificate, or whether it's a class and you actually get a transcript and a grade that we would submit to colleges later. And you know, how far away it is, how structured it is, all of that. Some of our writers and folks that are very interested in the humanities areas have been happy with the New York Times series of programs. Yes, that does require going to New York City, but we've had students do journalism programs there, do screenwriting, writing for television programs that they really have loved. I think you stay in something, I don't know if it's NYU dorms or something, but you've got some housing and stuff as part of it. Get a little splash of big city living, get some real practical, discernible writing skills. That can be super great. But again, you know, also working close to home, working with Parks and Rec, leading some local summer camps, that's all really great stuff. Volunteering at the JCC, coaching teams, there's a million different kinds of options. And then we've got some folks, you know, with family in Israel or other countries, and summer is a time to go reconnect with those folks. Perfectly fine and reasonable as well. So I want the headline to be like, don't panic about summer, but also give a little thought to summer. And, you know, if there are a couple of things they could do that would be both fun and useful. That was a really long answer. I'm so sorry for rambling so much. I hope it was helpful. I will just name, we have about 4 minutes left. So I just want to see if there's any last burning questions, topics on your mind you didn't get to pose yet.
I've got another quick question, Lauren. It's about kids who want to take a gap year. Do they then apply for colleges prior to the gap year or at the end of the gap year, or can be either?
Great question. I usually want folks to apply to college in senior year, unless, we know that the California State University system does not allow for a gap year. So if the goal becomes, I gotta go to Cal Poly, I want to go to Cal Poly, it's like the only place I could be happy, which isn't true. But maybe yes, it doesn't make sense to spend the money, submit the application, and then you're not enrolling because they don't, allow you to take a gap year. But for most students, it makes sense to go through the motions during senior year while you have access to me and other resources, while the peer culture is around applying to college. And for most students, it is perfectly fine to be admitted, request a deferral, and have your space saved for you for that year. So then you're not worrying about college anymore. That is what the majority of the students pursuing a gap year do. And occasionally there'll be somebody who does go through the college process. They have been dissatisfied with their options. And while they're on their gap year, they might decide to try again, which is fine. And I'm happy to help with that. I am available to folks after graduation. I just woke up to a class of 2023 person email in my inbox thinking like, I might want to transfer. But I do think it makes sense senior year when you've got all the resources and processes in place to just go through the motions. And I can give advice on certain institutions where, there's some gap programs that give you academic credit, which can be more or less complex with how that might work with the school you're planning to enroll in. But we can talk about those kind of individual things as they come up on a case-by-case basis. I do generally recommend not indicating to the colleges you're applying to that you plan on a gap year until you have signed a contract, paid some money. Teenagers can be fickle, might change their mind. So, and we want colleges to be fully invested in your application, predisposed to say yes to you. And then you can say, okay, that's so great. Thank you so much. And I'd like to do this next year. Can I get permission to do that? And it's usually a perfunctory thing of saying, this is what I plan to do. And them saying, terrific, we'll check in with you in the winter of next year to make sure you still plan to enroll. So. All right, and with that, I think we'll pause there. I'll put in a little shout out. We do have a gap visitor next week, a program called Where There Be Dragons, which is not Israel-based. They have programs all around the world, very language immersion programs. They'll be in the comments on Thursday. So that's something for students who aren't necessarily thinking about Israel. And more visitors to come, more information to come. And we will do this again next month in February and have a different set of things that we'll talk about, or maybe we'll talk about the same things. I don't know, we'll find out. But I will send a recording out early next week, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom.